We remember him as the ultimate architect of order, the general who brought France from chaos to empire, the lawgiver who codified a continent. But what if we have him backwards? What if his true, lasting legacy wasn't order, but chaos? This isn't the story of his rise and fall. This is the story of the shockwaves he sent through history. Waves that dismantled kingdoms, forged nations, and redrew the world map in a storm of unintended consequences. Welcome to the Napoleon paradox. Order sold brilliantly, chaos created spectacularly. A single will imposing a system breeding resistance, law and fire, twinned instruments, and the bill would come due. He inherited a revolution drenched in blood and uncertainty. France was exhausted. The promise of 1789 had curdled into a decade of terror, political purges, and the weak, corrupt rule of the Directory. The nation craved stability above all else. Into this vacuum of power and purpose stepped a man who promised order. He answered with ceremony. In the grand cathedral of Notre Dame, with the Pope as a spectator, he took the crown and placed it on his own head. This was not a divine right passed down through generations. This was power seized, not bestowed. A monarchy forged by a republican sword. He killed the revolution as a regime, the chaotic, unpredictable force that had devoured its own children. He did so by becoming its ultimate product, an autocrat who institutionalized its most potent ideas. Napoleon exported a toolkit for modernity: liberalism, secular law, and careers open to talent. His Napoleonic Code, a monumental work of legal rationalization, swept away the tangled mess of feudal laws and local customs. Ancient guilds cracked, their exclusive privileges pried open. For the first time, a unified legal framework promised equality before the law, on paper at least. But this new equality was not for everyone. The code enshrined patriarchal authority. Women lost rights they had briefly gained during the revolution, bound back to the legal authority of their fathers and husbands. The church, once a rival power, was tamed, not destroyed. Through the Concordat of 1801, it was brought under state control, its influence harnessed for social order. Central authority tightened its grip, with prefects appointed from the capital to govern every department. Paris was everywhere. This new order was built on a new kind of social contract: militarized citizenship. Rights came with duties, the foremost of which was service to the state. Law and conscription became the twin arteries of his empire, pumping life into his grand ambitions. The state became the ultimate parent. New secular schools, the lycées, were established to train loyal servants of the state, instilling a uniform curriculum and a devotion to the emperor. A vast, rationalized bureaucracy was created, where institutions performed legitimacy, not debate. He minted a new dignity, the citizen as an instrument of a grand national project. A dictator who made citizens, and citizens who made an empire move. He ended the revolution as popular upheaval, replacing the unpredictable street with the predictable parade ground. He did so even as he propagated its core principle: equality under a set of rules he alone wrote. Secular lives were regularized, measured, and recorded from birth to death. Property was protected, contracts enforced. It was a society of profound order and predictability. But it was a brittle order, where freedom was rationed by a single indomitable will. And what he organized with such ruthless efficiency would soon swarm beyond his control. The very tools of centralization and national identity he perfected in France were being exported with his armies. Seeds planted in the conquered soil of Italy, Germany, and Spain were already sprouting. These seeds would grow into new nationalisms, new demands for liberty, new states organized against the very model that created them. Their harvest would not be his. Before Napoleon, the map of Central Europe was a relic of the medieval age. It was a chaotic mosaic of over 300 princedoms, duchies, free cities, and ecclesiastical lands, loosely bound within the 1,000-year-old ghost of the Holy Roman Empire. This was a world of bewildering complexity, defined by overlapping loyalties, ancient privileges, and a patchwork of local laws and customs. Power was personal, tied to a prince or a bishop, not to a people or a territory. The very idea of a unified Germany or Italy was little more than a geographic expression, a dream confined to poets and intellectuals. After him, the pieces were fewer, the picture simpler. Napoleon, the revolutionary on horseback, acted as a brutal but effective historical accelerant. He swept away the feudal leftovers with the stroke of a pen and the force of his armies. In 1806, he formally dissolved the Holy Roman Empire, and in its place, consolidated the German states into the Confederation of the Rhine, a French satellite. The identities he inadvertently forged in this crucible would be sharper, more potent, and ultimately turned against him. He was both the child and the destroyer of the revolution. In the territories he conquered, Germany, Italy, Spain, he smashed the ossified structures of the old feudal order. He replaced the bewildering variety of local custom with the rational clarity of his civil code. Arbitrary privilege was supplanted by equality before the law, feudal tribute by a standardized, efficient system of tax. This was not liberation, but rationalization for the purpose of extraction and control. He secularized power, seizing church lands and subordinating the clergy to the state, unseating ancient patrons who had commanded loyalty for centuries. He knit disparate regions together with uniform weights and measures, and with new, straight roads designed for the rapid march of his armies and the flow of commerce. But this very imposition, this rational, foreign, and often brutal efficiency, bred a powerful and unforeseen reaction. Identity, once local and dynastic, began to reform in opposition to the occupier. Foreign rule sharpened a new and potent sense of we. In Prussia, reformers like von Stein and von Hardenberg argued that to defeat Napoleon, the state must be remade. The subject must become a citizen. Prussians began to see themselves not merely as subjects of a king, but as members of a German people, a nation with a shared destiny. In Russia, the vastness of the land itself seemed to join the cause, an unforgiving ally against the invader. Here, the Tsar, the Orthodox faith, the Cyrillic language, and a deep, abiding memory of the soil coalesced into a formidable national resistance. It was a patriotism that was profoundly conservative, religious, and xenophobic. Across the continent, French repression only hardened this newfound resolve. Every requisitioned bushel of grain, every conscripted son, every public execution became a grievance not just for a family or a village but for the nation. The printing press, once the engine of the Enlightenment, now spread a new vocabulary of belonging, circulating patriotic poems, political tracts, and histories that defined who we were and why they must be expelled. In university halls and smoky taverns, cadres of intellectuals and students formed. Philosophers like Fichte delivered addresses to the German nation in occupied Berlin, transforming abstract ideas into a radical call to arms. Secret societies like the Tugendbund in Germany or the Carbonari in Italy brewed public futures in private, plotting for a day of national liberation. The empire, stretched thin from Madrid to Moscow, began to bleed from 1,000 cuts. The Spanish ulcer alone consumed hundreds of thousands of French troops, a constant drain of men and morale. From Berlin to Königsberg, the Prussian military was reborn. The old duty to a monarch was being fused with a new, more powerful duty to the nation. Elites and students, peasants and poets, began to converge on a new, dangerous arithmetic of identity. Sacrifice for a king was an obligation. Sacrifice for the fatherland became a sacred calling. It gained a surname: German, Spanish, Russian. Napoleon, the master of logistics and grand strategy, trusted that the sheer speed and force of his movement could outrun its political meaning. In 1812, he marched his Grande Armée, over 500,000 strong, into the heart of Russia. He expected a decisive battle, a treaty, a surrender. Instead, the Russians gave him empty space and scorched earth. They torched their own holy capital, Moscow, a stunning declaration of nation over city, of collective purpose over material pride. His rational, secular logic of statecraft met their profound, almost mystical refusal to be conquered. Guerrilla warfare, the brutal Russian climate, and a culture of endurance formed an alliance he could not outmaneuver or rout. The deeper he had marched into the vastness, the less he actually ruled. His authority dissolved into the snow and the mud. General Winter wrote the epitaph for the Grande Armée, but it was the spirit of nationalism that had written the script for its destruction. The catastrophe in Russia emboldened his enemies. The very peoples he had provoked and inadvertently defined now converged in a great battle of the nations at Leipzig to break him. In the wake of his defeat, communities across Europe tasted the intoxicating power of self-assertion. Even as the old monarchies were restored at the Congress of Vienna, they could not turn back the clock. The restoration had to acknowledge the new facts on the ground. The simplified map Napoleon left behind became the template. Names hardened into nations. Shared memory, forged in the fires of resistance, became a political program for the future. Napoleon had sought to build a universal empire based on reason. Instead, he had unintentionally unleashed its antithesis, a world of passionate, competing nation-states. The modern century, with all its promise and all its peril, had been summoned. Napoleon's masterpiece was the Corps d'Armée, a self-contained army in miniature, complete with its own infantry, cavalry, and artillery. These formations were designed to be autonomous, fast, and convergent. They could march dispersed, living off the land to increase their speed, only to coalesce with breathtaking precision on the battlefield, overwhelming an enemy accustomed to facing a single, monolithic force. This system delivered unparalleled efficiency at the point of contact, and it enabled a new level of brilliance at the point of decision. It was the engine of his famous maneuver sur les derrières, allowing him to pin an enemy with one cause while the others swept around to strike the decisive blow. For Napoleon, tempo itself was a weapon, a relentless pressure that shattered his opponent's command cycles and broke their will to fight. But behind the dazzling operational art, the strategic ledger groaned. The very speed of the Grande Armée was its vulnerability. Its supply system, a patchwork of depots and local foraging, was never designed for the vast distances of continental warfare. As the empire expanded, the lines of communication lengthened, and with every league, fragility grew. Each brilliant victory was Pyrrhic on a strategic scale. The campaigns in Spain and Central Europe consumed the means to win the next war, bleeding the army of veteran soldiers and irreplaceable horses. At Austerlitz, the short game was sublime, a perfect symphony of maneuver and timing. But this tactical perfection masked a deeper, unsolved problem. Occupation was a brutal arithmetic he never mastered. Every province held, every town pacified, meant a battalion lost to garrison duty. A unit subtracted from the field army, unable to contribute to the next decisive battle. The empire was consuming its own teeth and claws. In this environment of constant, low-level warfare, Clausewitzian friction turned elegant plans into desperate guesses. Worse, the entire system was built to be directed by one brain. His marshals were brilliant executors, but they were not trained for independent strategic thought. The system had one point of failure. Without him, initiative scattered. When he was not present, his subordinates often proved hesitant, quarrelsome, and incapable of the decisive action he demanded. This confluence of flaws reached its apotheosis in the vast frozen emptiness of Russia. Here, logistics ceased to be a problem and became fate. The strategy of living off the land failed utterly in the sparsely populated scorched earth. No fodder meant no transport, and no transport meant no army. The geometry of retreat became a nightmare. One bridge, too many souls. The Grande Armée, the most magnificent military instrument of its age, shrank to the scale of individual human suffering. Escape, not victory, became the sole objective. Artillery without horses is merely sculpture. And at Waterloo, the final act, the bill came due. Rain-soaked ground delayed his attack, and timing failed. The terrain itself betrayed him. His tactical genius, predicated on maneuver, met the unyielding prepared resilience of Wellington's infantry on the reverse slope. And then, the long game arrived on schedule, wearing Prussian colours. The Allies had finally learned to coordinate, to endure, and to trust the clock. An empire calibrated to the genius of one man met the moment he could not extend himself any further. Tactical efficiency without strategic endurance is a house built on sand. It collapses into ruin, and ruin echoes. He failed to keep a French empire, but he succeeded in destroying the old one. Germany, once a quilt, stitched into a nation. Italy, imagined in salons, walked onto the stage. The nation-state became the grammar of power. Liberalism and law traveled with papers and uniforms. Mass warfare and mass society learned from each other. Consent was staged, then demanded. The state taught identity to its heirs. Speed made centralized dreams plausible. His body lies in perfect order. His legacy moves in perfect chaos. He sought to control everything, and unleashed forces no emperor can command. The last great emperor and the first great revolutionary of the modern age.